All right, so you know how sometimes you kind of stumble across a story or an idea
Mm-hmm.
and it just grabs your attention?
Yeah.
And you start digging a little deeper and it's like, what's really going on here?
Right.
There's more to this than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what we're doing today, taking a deep dive into the real-world echoes
Mm-hmm.
and the scientific possibilities that
Yeah.
we found in this sci-fi thriller you shared with us, the HAARP paradox.
It's really quite something when we looked at the narrative that you sent over.
Yeah.
The thing that really struck us right away was how this story blends actual scientific research
Right.
with, those conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
The ones that never really seem to go away.
Right.
And he even kind of touches on these mind-bending concepts about the very nature of reality.
Yeah,
So our goal today is to unpack all of that for you.
exactly.
We want to explore those points where the fiction you encountered sort of brushes up against established scientific fact. And we'll see where those real-world discussions take some really interesting turns.
Exactly. And hopefully we won't completely overwhelm you with information.
Right.
So for our listeners coming to the HAARP paradox, maybe for the first time through these sources,
Yeah.
the story centers around a government project called HAARP.
Mm-hmm.
And in the story, its official purpose is the study of the ionosphere.
Right.
But there's this clandestine element that's focused on weather manipulation.
Yeah.
And that's where things really start to get interesting.
Absolutely.
The story kicks off when an experiment designed to weaken a hurricane
Mm-hmm.
accidentally rips a hole to another reality.
Oh, wow.
And then all these crazy events start happening,
Like what?
like distorted radio signals, strange creatures start appearing, and there's even a second moon in the sky for a while.
That's a lot.
It's wild.
It sounds like a classic science fiction setup with some incredibly high stakes.
Absolutely.
But what makes it so compelling, and I think relevant to the material you've been looking at, is that it's grounded in some real anxieties.
Right.
Anxieties
Yeah.
that exist in the real world.
Yeah.
And it engages with real scientific concepts,
Yeah.
even if it stretches them a bit.
Yeah, it definitely plays with those ideas.
So why don't we start with HAARP itself?
Okay, let's unpack HAARP for everyone.
It's a good place to start since you've been researching it.
So HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, it's not just made up for the story.
Right.
It's a real research facility.
Mm-hmm.
Officially, its purpose is to study the ionosphere.
Right, which, as you probably know from your research, is that layer of Earth's upper atmosphere that gets all charged up by the sun's radiation.
Exactly.
It's super important, this layer.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it reflects radio waves, so we can have long-distance communication.
Right.
And it's also where you get those incredible auroras.
The Northern Lights.
Exactly, the Northern Lights.
So beautiful.
Well, the scientists at HAARP, they use these high-frequency radio waves to heat up tiny parts of the ionosphere.
Yeah.
It's all very controlled.
Right.
And then they use all these fancy instruments to see what happens.
So that's the official story.
Right, the real science of it.
But as the story kind of hints at,
Yeah.
HAARP has been the center of a lot of conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah. I bet you've come across a few of those in your research.
Definitely.
What kind of stuff have you seen?
Well, there are claims that it can be used to control the weather,
Right.
trigger earthquakes,
Uh-huh.
disrupt satellites, even mess with people's minds.
It's amazing how these theories always seem to pop up,
Yeah.
especially when there's some big natural disaster or something weird happens with technology.
Right. It's like people are looking for an explanation.
Exactly. They want to know what's going on.
And it's interesting because Act 1 of the HAARP paradox plays into those theories.
Oh, how so?
There's this fictional program called Project Aeolus,
Okay.
and they're using HAARP to try and steer hurricanes
Wow.
and take out enemy satellites.
So it's tapping into that fear that some people have about powerful technology,
Right.
especially when it's in the hands of the government.
Yeah. And that theme definitely runs through some of the alternative sources I've been looking at.
I can see how that would be concerning for some people.
But here's the thing that's really fascinating to me.
Exactly.
There's this huge disconnect between what scientists say HAARP can do
Right.
and what these conspiracy theories claim.
Okay. I'm listening.
Most scientists who study the ionosphere and all that, they're pretty clear that what HAARP can affect the ionosphere.
Right. Because that's what it's designed to do.
Exactly. But they say it's not powerful enough to cause hurricanes or earthquakes.
Because it doesn't have that kind of power.
Right. It's like imagine trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon.
That's a great analogy.
That's HAARP compared to the forces of nature.
The scale is just completely different.
Exactly.
So I think that's a key takeaway for our listeners. There's this massive difference in the amount of energy we're talking about.
Right. And it's important to remember that as we go deeper into this.
Absolutely.
So while the HAARP paradox uses these conspiracy theories to tell a good story,
Yeah, it's a great hook.
we really need to be clear about what's fiction
Mm-hmm.
and what's real.
You're right. It's all about separating fact from fiction.
Especially with something like HAARP.
Exactly. So we've talked about the real science.
Yeah.
And we've touched on the conspiracy theories.
Right.
But the story goes even further.
It does.
It takes this idea of weather manipulation and connects it to these interdimensional rifts.
It's a pretty wild leap.
It is. But before we jump into other realities,
Okay.
let's stick with this idea of weather manipulation for a minute longer.
All right. So in Project Aeolus,
Uh-huh.
they're trying to control hurricanes and even make it rain.
Right.
It almost sounds like a super-powered version of cloud seeding.
That's a good way to think about it,
Right.
because weather modification isn't just science fiction.
Oh, I know.
Scientists have been working on ways to influence weather patterns for decades.
Yeah, like cloud seeding to help with droughts.
Exactly. Or trying to clear fog around airports.
Right, and there's research into even more advanced techniques.
Absolutely.
But here's where the HAARP paradox takes things to a whole new level.
Okay, what happens?
When they try to weaken this huge hurricane,
Mm-hmm.
it sets off these global disasters.
Like what kind of disaster?
Lightning storms erupt all over the planet,
Wow.
and the Earth's magnetic field goes haywire.
That's not just making it rain anymore.
No, it's not.
It's like they've broken something.
Yeah, and this is where the story dives headfirst into science fiction.
It definitely crosses that line.
They're saying that the ionosphere is like this barrier between realities.
It's a pretty wild concept.
And HAARP ripped a hole in it.
So it's not just manipulating the weather.
No.
It's messing with the fabric of reality.
Exactly.
So now we're talking about the multiverse
Right.
that came up in those references you sent me.
Yeah, academic and sci-fi references.
Right. So the idea of parallel Earths, different versions of reality existing at the same time.
It's a popular idea in science fiction.
It is, but, it also has some roots in real physics.
Yeah, that's what I found so interesting.
There are a few different theories out there.
Mm-hmm.
Some say new universes are constantly branching off from our own.
Like splitting off?
Yeah, because of these quantum events.
Okay.
Others say there are totally separate universes.
So, different physical laws?
Yeah, maybe even different dimensions.
Wow.
So the HAARP paradox definitely draws inspiration from these ideas.
It does.
And in the story, it seems like the ionosphere is that dividing line
Right.
between those realities,
This HAARP punched right through it.
creating this rift.
Exactly.
And that's how those creatures get through.
Right, those metallic snakes,
Oh,
the
cool.
disappearing squid, and those creepy birds with the glowing eyes.
It's like they don't belong here.
They don't.
They're from somewhere else.
Exactly.
It's really clever how the story uses this real technology like HAARP, something that people are already worried about.
Mm.
And then it connects it to something so out there, like interdimensional travel.
Yeah, it plays on our fears and our curiosity about the unknown.
Absolutely. And it makes for a really exciting story,
So this rift is open,
right?
and things are getting really strange.
What kind of string?
Well, there are distorted radio signals. GPS is going crazy.
Okay, that sounds like a mess.
Satellite images show things that shouldn't be there,
Like what?
like impossible land masses. And then there's that second moon.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that before.
It's just there in the sky for a while.
That's a bit unsettling.
And it's like these are signs that reality is breaking down.
Right. It's not just technology malfunctioning. It's
Mm.
something much bigger.
Something fundamental has changed.
So you've got these disruptions that could maybe be explained,
Well,
like some kind of massive electromagnetic interference.
right. Although nothing like we've ever seen before.
Right. It would have to be huge.
And then you've got these changes in the Earth's magnetic field,
Yeah, that would be a big deal.
like affecting our technology and even animal migrations.
Right. It would impact so many things.
And then it goes even further.
Okay, tell me more.
Things that are just completely unexplainable.
Like what?
Those land masses that appear out of nowhere. And that second moon.
Yeah, that's just not possible.
It's like the rules of reality don't apply anymore.
It's a very effective way to build suspense. It makes you feel like anything could happen.
Exactly. And then it gets even weirder.
How so?
The story starts introducing these subtle anomalies,
Okay, what kind of anomalies?
like shadows that are in the wrong place,
What do you mean?
like they don't line up with the light source,
That's strange.
and reflections in mirrors that are off.
Like they don't match the person looking in the mirror.
Exactly.
That's creepy.
And they even mention the Mandela effect.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's where a lot of people have the same false memory.
Right, like Nelson Mandela dying in prison.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes you wonder if your memories are even real.
It does.
And in the story,
Yeah.
it's like these little glitches or hints that another reality is bleeding into ours.
That's a really cool way to use the Mandela effect.
It is. It plays with your sense of reality.
And it makes you question what's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really effective way to build that unsettling feeling.
So then the story starts asking this big question.
What's that?
What if the reality we're living in isn't the original one?
That's a mind-blowing idea.
It is.
And it ties into the Lost Earth theory.
Right. The idea that our reality has been shifted or replaced somehow.
So it's not just a rift.
No.
It's like our whole reality might be borrowed.
Exactly.
And those creatures from another Earth,
Yeah.
they make you question which reality is the real one.
It's a really unsettling thought.
It is.
And then there's that message from the robotic voice.
Do not close the rift.
Yeah. You are the visitors.
That's a huge twist.
It is. It completely changes the perspective.
It's like we're the intruders.
Exactly.
We're the ones who don't belong.
And it makes you wonder if maybe we did stumble into someone else's reality.
A long time ago.
Yeah, without even realizing it.
And maybe these weird things that are happening are signs of that original shift.
It's a really disturbing thought.
It is. And it makes you think about the Mandela effect in a new way.
Yeah, maybe those false memories aren't false at all.
Right. Maybe they're memories from a previous reality.
It's like our timeline has been tampered with.
That's a really unsettling possibility.
It is.
But the story doesn't really give us any answers.
No, it just leaves us with those questions.
Which I think is even more effective.
It definitely makes you think.
So we've talked about HAARP and the multiverse
Mm.
and all these strange anomalies.
But the story also mentions Nikola Tesla.
Oh, really? What about him?
Well, he claimed he could control the weather.
Right.
Yeah.
He had some pretty out there ideas.
And the story also brings up ancient myths about sky gods.
Like Zeus and Thor.
Exactly. It's like the story is hinting at a connection
A connection between...
between these ancient ideas and what's happening now.
I see what you mean.
Maybe people have always been aware of these forces.
Or maybe they just interpreted them differently.
Right. Maybe what they saw as gods,
Yeah.
we're seeing as scientific phenomena.
It's a really interesting way to connect the past and the present.
It adds another layer to the story.
So when you look at everything together,
Mm-hmm.
the HAARP paradox takes these real anxieties.
About technology and the environment.
Right.
And it mixes them with these mind-bending concepts like the multiverse.
Yeah.
And then it throws in all these creepy anomalies. And it leaves you wondering what's real and what's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really effective way to create a sense of unease.
It definitely gets under your skin.
But even though the story is fiction,
Right.
it raises some really interesting questions about the world.
And it makes you think about the limits of our knowledge.
It definitely does.
It makes you wonder if maybe there's more out there
Yeah.
than we realize.
Like those little glitches we experience
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah, those weird coincidences.
What if they're not just random events?
What if they're signs of something else?
Something we don't understand.
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought.
It is. It makes you want to keep exploring.
Definitely.
So I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah, don't just dismiss those strange experiences
Keep an open mind.
and keep learning.
Absolutely. There's a lot out there to discover.
You can dig deeper into HAARP research,
Yeah.
look into multiverse theory, and even explore the Mandela effect.
There's so much to learn.
And who knows what you might find.
Exactly. You might be surprised by what you uncover.